Hello, my name is Justin DeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, roar! We're talking about the extreme of filmmaking, or we're talking about Bayham to be specific.
That's right. We're talking about Michael Bay, and this is a topic that we are returning to. This is part of a series of episodes where we revisit topics from early in the run of the show. Back in 2015, on episode 3,
Yep.
we did Michael Bay and John Woo.
We were like, I don't think we'll have enough with John Woo and his filmography, the defining action filmmaker of all time.
We didn't quite figure out the format of the show yet. We thought maybe it'll be double features where we compare and contrast things. And I haven't gone back to listen to that episode because I think I was probably very lazy on it.
Well, you didn't really know what, again, the format was, research that you'd have to do, or even like how we would structure these conversations. And Michael Bay is also not a favorite of yours.
Well, I also think I was probably lazy, just not having listened to it. I think I was lazy because I think I compared Michael Bay's the bad one, and John Woo's the good one. And I want to try to interrogate some of that a little bit as we go forward.
And we have to say that the place Michael Bay had when we recorded that episode, I think, is not where he is now.
For certain kinds of cinephiles, especially in the 2000s, Michael Bay was public enemy number one. He was an assault on good taste, on film grammar. He was everything that was bad about,
The MTV generation.
That's right. Low attention span, tacky, politically reactionary, just everything that was bad was embodied by him. And now I've definitely seen a lot of sort of revisionism around Michael Bay lately, probably because, like everything, politicians and ugly buildings, things get more respectable as they get older, but also Marvel is so dominant.
And is personality free.
That's right. Michael Bay used to be like the default blockbuster style. Or if not the default.
What's funny is that every time I watch a Michael Bay film and I'm reminded of that, I try to think of the Michael Bay style films out there. And, they probably exist, but they've fallen so completely out of my mind that I can't even think of people trying to imitate him that well.
It's funny. When I look back now, I think more of Roland Emmerich as being the defining filmmaker of that time.
Maybe if you want to look at Bad Company, which is a Joel Schumacher film, that is definitely Bay-ish in that he's trying to do that kind of thing.
Or is that Tony Scott?
Yeah, that's the difference, right? Between Tony Scott and Michael Bay, who, if you watch their films, you're like, oh, they're the same, but they, I think, are distinctly different.
Now, here's what Roger Ebert wrote about Armageddon in the year 1998. He wrote, "Here it is at last, the first 150-minute movie trailer. Armageddon is cut together like its own highlights. Take almost any 30 seconds at random, and you'd have a TV ad. The movie is an assault on the eyes, the ears, the brain, common sense, and the human desire to be entertained." Now, I also want to take you back to a very crucial moment, the Big Bang moment of vulgarotourism, which was the following year.
Yeah.
The following year, this was the event that launched 1,000 Mubi notebook think pieces. The Criterion Collection allows Armageddon in.
Allows supposedly by force. Now, I was looking, I've read this, that Michael Bay was like, I want you to put my movies out on your label. That he was very adamant about this.
I'm sure he was.
And that I'm going to keep returning to this, but Michael Bay wants to be respectful. And I think you have to view his work through this prism, and a lot of the choices that he makes will make more sense. In other words, he wants to be David Fincher, specifically.
Well, in the Criterion essay, there's or the booklet that accompanies the release, there's an essay by Janine Basinger, who was his professor at the film school that he went to.
She was a big Michael Bay fan when he was a film student.
And she's a very distinguished scholar and academic. And she writes, "Despite what you may have heard, Armageddon is a work of art by a cutting-edge artist who is a master of movement, light, color, and shape, and also of chaos, razzle-dazzle, and explosion." And here's the other thing she says that's important. "If he weren't working in Hollywood, Bay would be the darling bad boy of the intelligentsia." So that, I don't agree. Yeah. But that is, in certain circles, I'm thinking about how a few years ago, Richard Brody wrote an article for the New Yorker called "With Transformers: The Last Night, Michael Bay has become an experimental filmmaker of pure sensation."
Okay, Richard.
And I dispute most of that because like if we're taking the term experimental cinema and we're
Oh, you mean that it makes no sense and there's no engagement to it?
Right. So like if you're divorcing experimental cinema from like its material and like economic conditions and you're just using it like that, then all films are experimental.
Yes.
Every film's an experiment.
Especially every bad movie is experimental.
That's right.
Like,
every movie's trying something.
Yes, that's right.
But then also, like, if you were going to compare Michael Bay to Stan Brakhage or Paul Schertz, I'm sorry, it's not the same.
No.
Like there's a difference. And I'm not putting like hierarchies here, but there's like a difference between beauty and sensation.
Yeah. And the intent that Michael Bay is trying to do as well.
Right.
Like he wants to be respected. I don't think he thinks of Stan Brakhage. Or it's just the way that he approaches crafting these images and the maximalist tendencies that have defined his entire career.
And that doesn't mean he's not an artist. It doesn't mean he's not a serious artist even, and that he doesn't have a vision. It's just, I think...
I mean, that's the argument that everybody makes, right? Like you'll see oral histories like Ben Affleck being like, Michael Bay is clearly an auteur because he has a distinctive voice, point of view, and that he returns to it over and over again in his films. By that definition, he is absolutely an auteur. It's undeniable.
Right. What I will say, though, is at this point, I don't think it's productive to complain, as Roger Ebert did in 1998, that like, well, this doesn't conform to the way a movie's supposed to look.
Yeah.
Like at this point, you have to be like, okay, well, he's going for something else then. And so what is that and how successful is that?
But you can understand the fear that critics would be is that like, are all movies going to be like this from this point on?
And so now it's much easier to give him grudging respect or give him something because, you know, now that he's no longer number one.
No. And that no one is imitating him at all either.
Yeah. And
if anything, look at streaming content. It has pulled as far away from the maximalist, this is the Bay personality style. And now you have more bland, homogenous. You don't want anyone making decisions behind the camera because a committee can do it. While the Bay films are all about the individual screaming at the crew people to get the vision that he wants on screen, which is what he perceives to be cool and to be visually appealing. Now,
and
I don't know if you don't need to agree with that, but that's what Bay wants.
Well, and when things go out of fashion, it can become easier to sort of see what they are. So like, as I was watching Transformers Age of Extinction this week, a movie I did not like, to be clear. But like for the first 30 minutes.
Oh, you didn't? I thought that you would, Will.
I tried.
There is no planet where you come to me and you go, you know what, Transformers, I think it's pretty good. The 2 hours and 45-minute running time of robots that are indistinguishable from each other fighting.
I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. But I will say that for the first, let's say 40 minutes, I was like, well, every shot is beautiful.
Every shot is beautiful in Transformers.
And when you compare it to, and I hate to use Marvel as like the cudgel, because who knows, maybe in 10 years when they're out of fashion.
We'll look back at Marvel and be like,
those beige images, those static camera compositions, that complete lack of imagination. Boy, that sure was great. But I don't know, you look at Transformers Age of Extinction now, and yeah, like every shot looking like a goddamn Norman Rockwell painting.
And the thing about the Michael Bay films is that they're visceral in a physical way that is done on set. Like he loves practical sets. He loves blowing stuff up. He loves capturing the sun coming down and framing the actors.
Oh.
Like he doesn't like shooting on green screen sets.
Yeah.
That is not the Michael Bay thing. So it's the antithesis of everything that is blockbuster filmmaking now. Now, does that make it better? No, that's not what we're saying.
Although, gun to my head, if I have to choose
the new Michael Bay film,
a new Michael Bay
versus
movie,
the new Marvel,
Marvel, I go Bay every time now.
Yeah. Well, as we'll get into when we talk about Pain and Gain, guess who wrote that movie? Wait, what's that? They're in the Marvel machine now, and they wrote the Avengers film. Yes, indeed, they did.
It's where they all end up. But for this episode, I think we're thinking of like maybe going chronologically.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I've absolutely seen every Michael Bay feature film, probably more than once.
I've seen most of them. And Justin's going to fill in the gaps.
So we can talk about his background a little bit, but there's not really anything that exciting. That, you know, he grew up in the Valley in LA. He basically worked his way onto film sets. He had no kind of like background or Nepo baby stuff. You feel that's kind of like, that's probably Michael Bay's DNA, right?
Well, he feels like, I mean, knowing that he's not that, he feels like a James Cameron type where he was just this like incredibly confident, self-possessed guy, this gearhead who with a Napoleon complex, who came in and was like, I'm the fucking best and I'm going to show it to you. And he had the talent to back it up.
That's the thing. The Napoleon complex is important because Michael Bay is a nerd who wants to be cool. And he will do that by defining what cool is with every fiber in his being. But you watch it and you're like, oh yeah, this is a nerd putting these images together. And we can speak to it as nerds.
And also, there was a period, like I want to say 10, 15 years ago, when people would compare him negatively to Christopher Nolan. Like Christopher Nolan was smart and brainy and technically adept, and he was not vulgar. And I think the two are not... Well,
that far apart is what you're trying to say?
Well, they're far apart in a lot of ways,
Yes.
but then in other ways, I'm more hesitant to sort of rank them than I used to be. Because I also think, among other things, Christopher Nolan is also like a nerd who wants to be cool.
100%, yeah.
And that adds a certain like strangeness to his movies too. Like Tenet is a movie that's built around like the aesthetics of what a really strange, like posh kid thinks is cool.
Like, these are two guys that I don't think I could be their friends.
No.
Like, Michael Bay, and they're so extremes. Like, Michael Bay's like, oh yeah, we're going to the club, right?
Yeah.
Wearing like a shirt with no neck, big gold chain.
Christopher Nolan's
Is
got
like-
the suit and tie.
Yeah,
and
he's like, oh, no, don't sit down on that chair. That's just decorative.
they're also megalomaniacs.
Yeah, both of them are megalomaniacs.
But one's quiet and one's loud.
Loud, yeah. But I mean, they're powerful in probably exactly the same way. So Michael Bay directs music videos, commercials. You've seen the Got Milk ad, right?
Yeah,
With
absolutely.
Aaron Burr.
And Janine Basinger says that, like, from the moment she saw his first photographs, he was fully formed. He was Michael Bay. Although we are going to see an evolution.
Yeah. So Jerry Bruckheimer picks him up and he's like, I like this guy's style. It is very evident. No one else is making anything like this. At this point, Michael Bay is part of Propaganda, which is like all the big music video directors got together, formed a company, and they would hire each other out. I could not find the article where this was written, but supposedly Michael Bay, like, he felt like the low man on the totem pole, and that like people like David Fincher were getting the respect, and then he would study David Fincher's music videos and copy them almost wholesale in his.
That's interesting.
David Fincher is the one who had that shot of the words and then a plane flying over them before Michael Bay did.
So there are certain things about David Fincher I see in Michael Bay, but also like David Fincher is much more orderly.
Yes.
At least his films are. Like, you know, you see behind the scenes footage of Michael Bay. Like, have you seen the footage of him directing Pearl Harbor?
Oh, where he's like, move that fucking boat, move that boat.
And it's like I want 5 guys on fire. I want this. I want that. It's like, and the movies are like that too. There's not in Michael Bay's action scenes or even his stories, I would argue, like an orderly like cause and effect, you know, accumulation.
I'd be fascinated to know, like, does Michael Bay storyboard a lot? It doesn't feel like he does because he's very kinetically involved in the filmmaking. He's always behind the camera. He's getting the shots. It's like move, move, move. He's always getting like 70 setups in a day, which is like a lot.
And it feels like when you look at the behind the scenes footage, which may not be telling the full story, but he looks very improvisatory.
Yes.
Given, you know, the scale that he's working on.
I mean, you saw that footage, right? That was going around when Ambulance came out, where he almost got hit by the car, when the car like swerved. And it was just right there in front of it.
And I guess this is a lot of what people like about him, those who like him, and also what keeps people like me resisting him, because even Ambulance, which we'll get to, like, I kind of like Ambulance, but like the sheer like visual maximalism of it, the camera going like a million miles a minute, like it's arbitrary. It doesn't like build, you know.
So I'm going to go on the record right now and say that, like, do I love Michael Bay? That's a tough question. I definitely like him. I am attracted to his filmmaking style, but I am exhausted every time I watch one of his movies. I always go in being like, oh yeah, this rules. We don't get this anywhere else. And then by hour like 2, I'm like, oh boy, okay, we done here yet? Like, what's going on?
I at this point would say I think there are good things about him.
Yes. There are also bad things.
A lot of bad things. He's not my cup of tea.
He's definitely my cup of tea.
And if all movies were like him, I would hate it.
But not all movies
but
are
they're
like
not
him. Yeah,
anymore.
I think I would not like it either if all movies were like Michael Bay films.
Yeah.
But when you silo them and you're like, this is this one flavor, it's like, okay, then you can have this a little bit, you know, maybe every couple of days.
Absolutely.
So he has Bad Boys, a movie I do not like.
I've never seen the first Bad Boys from 95.
I think it's okay. I can understand that, like, the star power of Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, like, made it a hit. They weren't working with that much money. There's a famous story that one of the big iconic shots of a guy being blown out of an airplane, Michael Bay had to pay for it out of his own paycheck, $25,000, I think, to get it because he felt he needed that. And what's funny about that is, like, oh yeah, that is one of the iconic shots of the movie. His other films would just non-stop those shots. So they lose a little bit of meaning when you see them all in sequence. But I can understand why it was a hit. Doesn't really work for me. I remember watching it as a kid when I was more enveloped with like Bad Boys 2 and The Rock, and going back to Bad Boys and going, oh, this is not giving me the things that I loved about Michael Bay later on.
Now, sight unseen, it feels kind of in that like Beverly Hills Cop school.
Very improvisatory.
But also, or like Beverly Hills Cop 2, where it's basically an action movie, but with 35% comedy.
Oh, it's more like 75% comedy.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Lots of comedy in that movie. But then we get The Rock, which is kind of like the definitive Michael Bay in some ways.
Well, in some ways, it's the one that, you know, after Bad Boys, the one
they're
that
like, oh, that's the
defined
good
him.
one. That's the good one.
Yeah, that's what people say about
Yeah.
The Rock. And that's, you know, that they don't like Michael Bay if they say that's the good one. And I think The Rock's okay.
Oh, I love The Rock.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's one that I have never logged on Letterboxd. I watch it out of, you know, while I was doing other stuff because I've seen it a million times. And it's one I never want to go back to because I did see it a million times when I was a kid.
You know what's weird about me and The Rock now?
Yes, I know that you are worried about the collateral damage that is involved in the film.
Well, I know what you're saying,
Yes.
and I could get into that, but actually, what it is that it's sort of like halfway to the Ultimate Bay style, and now
Oh, that's what you want. You want the ultimate base
well,
style.
the problem is when he gives me the Ultimate Bay style, I don't like it.
Yes.
So
That's why it was tangible to people that were watching it. And I think that like Jerry Bruckheimer at this period of time, he was on such a like casting coup that he was going for like all the indie guys. Let's do something weird. Like Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery in this movie ground the film in a way that other Bay films do not have because the Bay style overwhelms all the other actors.
this actually is something I like about Michael Bay a lot. The actors he uses and the way he uses them. It's a strange, counterintuitive choice to cast Nicolas Cage as the star of your action movie in 1996.
Yes.
And to have him opposite Sean Connery. And Nicolas Cage is giving a full-on Nicolas Cage performance. All of the eccentricities. And like Sean Connery is more the grounding force next to him. He's the Abbott to the other guy's
you
Costello.
understand Sean Connery's charisma.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, you get it very pure, the purest he'll be in the 90s.
But I found also this week, just watching a Transformers movie, watching any of these movies, the movies are full of like really good actors.
But they can't do anything within the context of the Bay framework.
Well, I don't know. Like some of them, like I feel like these actors are really making a meal out of their lines.
I mean, they're yelling, yes.
Yeah, like his movies are full of, in some ways, they're full of like movie kind of pleasures. And so in The Rock, you've got Ed Harris, who's giving a full-on Ed Harris performance.
Yeah.
You've got Philip Baker Hall in a small supporting role.
He was just like off to the side, like
And-
throwing a line here or there.
And like when he has a line, he's great. You know, in some of these movies, Steve Buscemi's in it. Like Armageddon has this incredible cast.
Well, it has like Owen Wilson, it has Ben Affleck. I think Ben Affleck got cast out of like Chasing Amy.
Yeah.
But, like Jerry Bruckheimer saw him and brought him in. Owen Wilson coming probably off Bottle Rocket.
So like I think he appreciates actors. And he's interested in a strange mix of actors, and he plays to their strengths a lot.
A question. Do you think Michael Bay is funny?
No.
No, I don't think so either.
Although
he thinks he's funny.
There are times I've laughed in his movies, especially one that we're going to get to.
But like, I think The Rock and Armageddon have structural kind of like, they were messes supposedly when they were being filmed, but the structures of them are in place enough, maybe a producer, a Bruckheimer pushing him, that the pleasures of them, the payoffs of them work within the context of their construction.
But the humor, like he has such a like immature, douchey, like frat boy, sometimes cornpone sense of humor. And I'm saying this not even out of judgment, just out of description.
Yeah.
Like he loves fat jokes. He loves gay jokes.
Well, grotesqueries.
Yeah, he loves racist jokes.
He loves racist jokes.
And all of that, you know, like he has politically, or just, I don't know, as a human, he has weird tensions within him where like there's part of him that's like, you know, he loves the working class, salt of the earth.
He
like,
hates the working class. Though.
Well, yeah, like he loves the oil rig guy, but not if they're like some fucking fat, weak guy.
He
like,
loves the poster idea of these people.
Yes.
So
he has so much hatred. Like as we get on to Pain and Gain,
Yeah.
which
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet, but I'm just going to say to illustrate this point. There's so much ambiguity, I think, about what he thinks of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's character in that movie.
I was thinking a lot about that watching the movie.
Yeah.
Of like, what? Because anyway, we'll get to it when we get to it. But so from Armageddon, like Armageddon, huge hit as well. It comes out.
And that one, even more than The Rock, I think is the one that defines, this makes him public enemy number one. It also makes him the number one blockbuster guy, you know, besides Spielberg or whatever. And, you know, it's the one that, defines him, defines what the Bayham style is.
And people hate this.
They hate it.
They hate it, even though that it's making so much money at the box office.
It's the number one movie of 1998.
So I remember after Armageddon came out, that like Bay on the commentary for Bad Boys. That's right. I'm that big of a fan that I was listening. I vividly remember listening to the Bad Boys commentary track. It's a scene where one of the characters slams somebody else in a urinal. Michael Bay goes, "Oh yeah, my mom doesn't really like this, but the next movie I'm making is more of like a small romance. So, you know, I'm kind of doing it for her." You know what that movie was? Pearl Harbor.
Oh my God.
So like from Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, I love going through Bay's career because it is one of someone who wants to be respected, trying to make the decisions to push him in that direction.
Okay, well, we compared him to James Cameron already. Yeah. This is obviously
it's Titanic.
Yeah, and it's funny that the people I know who like Michael Bay,
no one likes Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, nobody's riding for this.
I feel like just thinking about it makes me laugh. And that, like, I haven't watched it probably since I saw it in theaters.
I think that Bay is at his best when there's a little bit more tension in. I mean, this movie, like, this truly is like a Norman Rockwell painting.
Oh yeah,
just
but
one,
like maximized.
Yeah, one like corny American vista after another, and the ones that are more interesting are the ones like, well, frankly, Armageddon. Like Armageddon, which I don't like, but
you don't like Armageddon? Oh, I love Armageddon.
No, not really. Although I was having a great time listening to his commentary this week.
That rules.
The Criterion DVD commentary of Armageddon, which I own, is awesome because you've got Michael Bay, peak Michael Bay, being like, "Man, I was working my effects team from day one.
I was saying, yeah, you throw those designs. That's wrong. It needs to be realistic."
And Ben Affleck is in the commentary. So funny.
Yeah, I mean,
so funny.
Those clips go around all the time of like Ben Affleck like making fun of the movies,
being like, "Why couldn't they just train astronauts to drill rather than train drillers to be astronauts?" And Michael told me to shut up.
There's a Ben Affleck commentary on Pearl Harbor too, and it's really funny. He's like, man. wait, why is that letter I'm reading upside down? What's going on there? Just so like it's screen forward.
Actually, there's a great moment in the Armageddon commentary where there's a shot where Bruce Willis is talking to Liv Tyler, and a helicopter lifts off behind them. They're on like an oil rig. And Ben Affleck says, "Yeah, you know, it's a real headache if you want to have a helicopter lifting off in a shot. There's so much safety concerns. It's really expensive. You have to build the whole day around it. And, you know, you probably wouldn't even have noticed it if I didn't point it out to you, but this is a big movie, so apparently you got to have a helicopter going off." It reminds me of that Terry Gilliam documentary, The Hamster Factor.
Yes, we need that hamster in the wheel turning in the background out of focus.
And I mean, I will say, like, that is the Bay style. You got to have a helicopter going off in the background.
But the thing about Bay is he can't build to the moments of the helicopter going off in the background, so it doesn't mean anything. This is the thing about Bay is that if you take shots, and this is probably like, you know, Roger Ebert, all those critics, this is what they hate. Like the idea of like, oh wow, that is amazing. But when you watch them in sequence, and especially when we get to the Transformers films, Bay cannot create an exciting action sequence to save his life.
I completely agree, and
I don't like.
And I'm sorry, I feel that way about The Rock.
Yeah.
Now, The Rock has a lot that's good about it. Like
those payoffs, I think they work.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And like the actors are great, and also just the gimmick of like Die Hard in Alcatraz basically is clever. And there are a lot of, it's like a video game, the structure of it going from one thing to another. But the individual action scenes,
well, you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so it's funny because I watch all these films and people, I remember just, oh, the hyper editing, blah, blah, blah. Boy, I take this Michael Bay editing over anything in the Marvel movies where I'm like, I don't even know what's going on.
And man, in Pearl Harbor, the Pearl Harbor sequence, which is supposed to be a showstopper, that's supposed to be like, okay, you saw Steven Spielberg with Saving Private Ryan with the beach scene.
Well, now you're going to follow that missile or bomb dropping as it falls from the sky.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that, but it's like, nobody talks about that scene. Nobody remembers that.
You don't remember when Cuba Gooding Jr. gets on the guns and he's like, oh,
yeah,
and he's firing the guns?
I do. I remember the bad parts of that scene.
Yeah. All right. So after Pearl Harbor, Michael Bay is going around saying like, what? This is not what you want from me? I'm trying to give it to you, the audience. All right. I'm going to indulge in every one of my worst instincts with Bad Boys 2. So I remember I watched Bad Boys 2 when we did our episode a decade
So
ago.
did I. That's the last time I saw
I
it.
really did not like it when I saw it.
Likewise.
I found it was so kind of like noxious, and like all the stuff I liked about it when I saw it as a teenager, like watching it 10 years ago, I was like, ugh, no.
I mean, all that Bay comedy, all that just
there's a lot of comedy in that.
all
movie.
that hatred of humanity. Like, isn't there that scene in it where they're like at a morgue or
Yeah,
something?
and they're like, look at the tits on her. Yes.
yeah. So the people who are the real freaks, the true Bay heads, this is their jam.
You know what? I feel like I'd go back and I'd be like, Bad Boys 2.
Yeah.
Well, what a time to be alive. But when I think that like Bad Boys 2, when it came out too, was representative of like the Maxim ideology of that time.
Absolutely.
It's not that anymore though.
Yeah, so it's easier.
If anything, I want no sex in my movies.
Yeah, right. It's very Spike TV.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, this summer when I was at the drive-in, the second movie on the double bill at 10 o'clock at night was Bad Boys 4. Is that
yeah,
what we're
Bad
at now?
Boys. No, wait.
Ride or Die.
Yeah, Bad Boys 3 was Bad Boys for Life, and then Bad Boys 4 is Ride or Die. Yeah.
Yeah, very confusing. And, watched 2/3 of it, and that's like, it's getting late.
Yep.
And I've seen this
they're
movie.
They're trying to do Michael Bay, but they don't have that, I don't know, the juice, if you will.
So I just left. I didn't see the end, and it felt liberating.
I vividly remember watching a special feature on Transformers Age of Extinction, and at one point Michael Bay goes, oh yeah, there's that Michael Bay juice right there, the secret sauce, if you will. And you know what that secret sauce was? He was literally talking about it literally. That's a lot of literallys. It's when a car jumps through the air and hits a guy in the face, and the guy just like spits in the air in slow motion. Michael Bay's like, that's the Bay sauce right there. That's what makes the shot. I think that's what obsesses him, is those kind of like that kinetic energy in a shot, but only in that shot, and he's incapable of thinking of the entirety of the moment.
Well, I think he likes to pummel the audience.
Yes.
And I think the audiences that like the movies, the people who went to see Transformers one after another, they liked that feeling of like a huge screen and just being annihilated by it over and over and over again.
Like The Island comes out, I remember not liking it very much.
The Island is another one that like Roger Ebert gave that 3 stars.
Yeah, Bay is very morose on the commentary track. I know you want to tell the anecdote about a party scene.
Oh yeah, I'm glad I forgot about this. I'm glad you brought this up. There is like a club scene in that movie, and it's like a futuristic club or something. And Bay said something like, yeah, my design guys, they showed me what their idea of what a club should look like. And I'm like, guys, you clearly haven't been to a club in years.
Can you imagine Michael Bay at a club?
Yes, I can.
I can.
Yeah, it's awful.
And that one, I remember him very morosely in the commentary being like, I thought this would do better. I think it's because the climax wasn't big enough. And I'm like, Michael, that is not the lesson you need to take away from the financial failure of The Island.
I haven't seen The Island since it came out.
I mean, there's people that defend it. It's just kind of a generic science fiction clone story.
Yeah.
It literally has a scene where it's like, I'm the real one. No, I'm the real one. It's like, come on, guys.
But listen, from that flop, and that was one of his, was that his first like unambiguous, I know Pearl Harbor underperformed.
Yes,
but
Island was the first like unambiguous, this is a failure that he's ever done.
So then he comes roaring back in 2007, but in some ways he retreats a little because he does a feature-length toy commercial. That's right, Transformers.
I remember I had just moved to Toronto and I was working on a film set. Me and a bunch of the crew members were going to see the film, and one of the guys like was a little awkward about how excited I was for this, even though I have no real nostalgia for the Transformers. It was just the idea of Bay playing in this wheel box interested me after being the disappointment of The Island. And I remember sitting there watching it and being like, I do not like this. This does not work for me.
Why didn't it work?
I thought it was a mess structurally. That thing of him building up to moments, completely absent in the Transformers. I did not like looking at the Transformers. I thought they're too busy. Bay, in every single one of his 5 Transformers films, hates the robots. He doesn't want to see them. He wants you to follow the humans. And I can understand the kind of principle that he's working through, which is you want the kind of feeling of being on the ground and looking at these big metallic monsters, unimaginable, fighting each other. I get it. But what that means is that you have action scenes going on in the background and you're like, I wish I was watching what was happening over there. because I don't get to see what's because I'm just following the humans run around.
Yeah, I mean, of the first 3 Transformers movies, I can't remember what I've seen. I've seen at least one of them all the way through.
So Transformers 1, do not like. Transformers 2, a heroically bad movie.
And this
writer's strike film.
Okay, this is when his reputation among critics and cinephiles was at its lowest.
Yes.
Because this movie was the number 1 movie
This
of the year.
has the robots with racist, like, caricature faces who are like, I can't read.
That's right.
Voiced by white guys.
Yeah.
Basically like Amos and Andy.
Yeah, and this movie, the disparity between what critics thought of it and what audiences thought of it was never bigger, maybe in the history of cinema.
Yeah. Transformers Dark of the Moon, I remember seeing it with our pal Peter in theater and liking it because it was like Bay was losing his mind. Like he just, Shia LaBeouf in it is just, and I know I like to say LaBeouf, that's not his name. LaBeouf. It is a man, like he is just kind of like, as the movie goes along, he's screaming more. He's just red faced, almost like he wants to be fired from the film as it's playing.
Okay, I'll have more to say about Transformers when we get to the one I watched this week.
So I remember enjoying that one, but still, like, I do not like the aesthetics that Bay brings to these movies. They feel very, because none of the sequences built anything. It's like, oh wow, the robots are gone. We're following someone else. Oh, there's an action scene going on in the back. That looks like, oh no, we're not following that. All of these movies have these vibes. I think the liberty of being able to create action scenes through CGI means, I think, hurts the films because you don't have that, like, oh, we have to follow these human characters.
Well, it's interesting. Comparing it to Marvel again, like one of the complaints that I and others wage against Marvel is that the action scenes feel like weightless and consequence free. I think Michael Bay's action scenes are a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like they don't feel weightless.
No.
They feel very heavy.
What I feel about Michael Bay is that it's weird because there's a difference between them being like consequence free and them being uninvolving.
Yes.
And I feel Michael Bay's action sequences are often uninvolving, and he tries to ground it in practical, real explosions, which is like being at like a destruction derby. You're like, woo! But imagine that destruction derby lasting for 2.5 hours of just explosions.
Okay, well, fuck. Let's talk about Transformers. I know we're getting ahead, but Transformers Age of Extinction.
Yes.
Because that's the 4th one. I watched it this week. This is the one where they trade in Mr. LaBeouf for Mark Wahlberg.
Okay. I love Mark Wahlberg in this movie.
Me too.
He is so miscast.
I mean,
he's like, I'm an inventor, man.
I think he's a great Michael Bay lead, though. He's really sincere.
Oh, that's the thing, right? Is that with Shia, there was no sincerity there. If anything, you feel him looking down on the material that he's being forced to go through. With Mark Wahlberg, he believes in this, in what he's doing.
So,
oh man, I found a transformer.
So the plot is incredibly stupid, and maybe we'll get to that. But just the action sequences, they are enormous. They are spectacular.
Yeah.
Like the special effects are much better, I think, than Marvel.
Are so many. Well, the thing about Bay is he loves blowing stuff up. So even with the giant robots, the robot will be crashing into a house, but that house will have exploded on set. So you will see that. But then he has nothing to interlink those things. But I want to talk about Transformers 4. Why it's my favorite is that, like, I feel all the elements are playing with each other in ways that are so Bay that I love. So even the action scenes, if they're not involving, you have stuff like Marky Mark's very earnest performance. You also have Stanley Tucci just hamming it up in the movie.
Right.
You have, Kelsey Grammer just like chewing the scenery.
Playing the evil CIA guy.
And you have so many baffling decisions, like the boyfriend of Marky Mark's daughter showing up and being like, listen, I know I'm older than your daughter, but legally in Texas, thanks to Romeo and Juliet laws, let me pull out this laminated card and show it to you.
Because he's 20 and she's 17.
Which would be statutory rape.
There's a whole scene about the age of consent in Texas.
Like Michael Bay thinks this is so funny.
Yeah.
And I think that's funny in a way that like Dark of the Moon is not, of like seeing a horrifying racist caricature in a butcher shop, like cutting up meat. And it's just, it hits those points perfectly for me. It does have there's a chase scene where Optimus Prime in this movie is psychotic and wants to kill all humans. Like,
Right.
he's like, I want to kill all humans.
Well, because the humans, led by Kelsey Grammer, who's actually a bad deep state guy
Yes.
in the CIA, he wants to wipe out the Transformers. He wants to do a Holocaust on Transformers.
This is another thing about the Transformers and like Michael Bay hating these characters. They are constantly brutally murdered. There's a scene in the third one where all the heroes are lined up and the bad guys are shooting them in the back of the head.
So to the idea that like these scenes have these movies have no consequences or whatever,
Yes.
like the plots are so arbitrary where, like all Michael Bay movies, you know, he loves Mark Wahlberg as just the working class guy on a farm who, unlike those like pencil pushing bureaucrats,
Played by Thomas Lennon.
those Harvard educated nerdzoids, you know, at the CIA or at the Department of whatever, you know, he understands things. But that character, that Mark Wahlberg character, well, also there's the whole plot about how like, yeah, my daughter can't date anyone because the world is unforgiving.
Oh, I can have sex with my daughter.
Yeah, exactly.
Who literally looks so orange that I think she should see a doctor.
Right.
She looks not healthy.
So there's a truck that he has where he's like, I think this is a Transformer.
It's a Transformer.
Well, of course it's a Transformer.
Yeah.
And for the rest of the movie, you follow Mark Wahlberg and his daughter and his daughter's 20-year-old boyfriend who are going from like action scene to action scene. And this guy who was just a farmer a minute ago,
he's got
like,
a gun.
yeah, he's like
firing.
he's riding these like Transformer helicopters. He's
But like when you're talking
doing
about
chase
this,
scenes,
this film is like experimental. Like the only way you can approach that is that, oh yeah, like A doesn't lead to B.
Yeah.
Like there's an action scene where like Marky Mark is driving and then Optimus Prime is fighting with another robot. You never saw him transform. You never saw how he got there. They're doing something. Then it cuts back, and then Optimus Prime is now just a truck drive. And I'm like, what is happening?
like if this were a logical movie, this would be about the evolution of Mark Wahlberg's character from being like a farmer, an inventor, like a smart guy, but somebody who's never had this kind of like, holy shit, he's riding a Transformer. He's doing a car chase through the streets of, what is it, New York or whatever.
No, Marky Mark's the guy that when he crashes that alien spaceship and some fucking dweeb,
Some latte swigging,
gets in his face, probably
Yeah.
soy in that latte.
Yeah.
He picks up that Bud Light off the street, he cracks it open, and
Yeah.
he downs it.
Yeah, so-
it was me, probably Matthew Kumar, Peter Kaplowski, Pierce Brosnan. We were like, woo! When that happened, we were laughing so hard.
Actually, the cause and effect or lack thereof of this movie reminds me of Jerry Lewis, where it's just
Yeah,
like
cracking up.
Yeah, cracking up. Where it's just like one scene and then another and then another, and the character is not consistent at all from scene to scene.
Yesterday when I was watching it, Emily walked in and she's like, this action scene is still going on. I'm like, there's still 45 minutes. They haven't even gone to Hong Kong yet.
I had the exact same. That is it in Chicago? Is that where it is? That middle
It feels
midsection
like the
scene.
climax. Like they're
Oh, I
facing
know.
off. Is it maybe New York? I don't remember where it is. It doesn't matter. They're facing like lockdown or some
It's
generic.
huge. There are planes going through the sky, and at this moment, I thought of The Dark Knight Rises, which I think is Nolan's worst movie by a country mile.
No contest.
And also, I'm not saying but also, I'm saying and also, just to compare it to this one, like that's a movie that crescendos. That has a slow build where there are action scenes and action scenes and action scenes, and like finally there's the big spectacular action scene all through the streets and skies of Gotham. And this movie has a scene like that every 20 minutes.
Yes, every 20. And it's like Mark Wahlberg's daughter, who is, I believe, David Beckham's daughter, or something like
Right.
that, is being chased by Transformer dogs through like an H.R. Geiger.
I found the movie at
Exhausting.
almost 3 hours.
Now, what if I was like, we will watch 15 minutes of this every couple of days?
Then I might enjoy it.
yes.
Yeah, because every shot is incredible.
Oh, yeah. And the sun is setting.
Which is not the case with Nolan.
No. He tries. doesn't he?
Nolan's a
But he's
competent.
cold.
He's a competent filmmaker,
Yeah.
but it's like scene after scene of this movie. Holy shit.
Now, something else I love about this movie is that Bay's person, like, no one is telling Bay no. Now, he is giving, like, acquiescing. He loves the military. He's going to give the military, even though they're always incompetent in these movies. They're always very bad at their job. But, like, the fact that the rumor goes, there's been no confirmation of this, that he hated TJ Miller so much in this movie that he just kills him off out of nowhere.
I was surprised by that.
Everyone is surprised.
Yeah,
when
he
that
dies 20 minutes in. It's like,
in a horrifying way.
Yeah.
And Optimus Prime off screen is like, I'm sorry for your friend. And he never gets mentioned again. So, yeah, I think Transformers 4, I remember being like, so much fun. Yeah, the Transformers Bay is find a groove. Transformers 5 comes out. I'm like, do not like. Do not like Transformers
So I
5.
saw Transformers the last night and I saw it because I had already seen 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi.
Yes.
And I kind of liked that movie. I mean, it's terrible, obviously.
Yes.
And that has my favorite scene in any Bay movie, which is like, you know, it's at
Is there a Hillary stand-in in that movie?
well, there's a guy who comes up to John Krasinski, Office John, who's all buffed up. And he's like, "We don't need you meatheads here. We have the finest minds from Harvard," which is an awesome line to have in a movie. It's like, oh, you're going to get told.
But all right, we need to talk about what the Bay Defenders. This is the movie they point to.
This is their Jackie Brown.
Yeah, the Jackie Brown, Pain and Gain. So this is Bay's been in the Transformer mines for 3 movies at this point.
Yeah.
They're making billions of dollars. They just keep wanting him to come back.
But and finally he's made this movie that's his one for me. And that, I mean, it stars Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Mark Wahlberg. So it's not like he's, you know.
He's not picking up like little indie actors to make this film.
Yeah. And it still probably cost $100 million.
And this is him being like, I want to make a Coen Brothers movie. That's it. If people don't know Pain and Gain, the plot is, I mean, this is a movie that like, it's basically The Wolf of Wall Street.
And it came out the same year.
Oh, did it come out exactly
Yeah,
the same year?
yeah.
But while The Wolf of Wall Street is about people that are successful, this one is about people that are not very good because they're dumb and poor.
That's right.
But it's about the grind set.
Yes. This movie picks up where the last scene of Wolf of Wall Street left off. You know, sell me this pen.
And so we have Marky Mark starring in this film as a guy that he works at a gym, but he wants so much more. He wants the American dream. He wants to mow that lawn as far as the eye can see.
And the American dream is just that.
Yeah, that's it. There's nothing else.
Yeah. He wants a piece of the pie.
Yep. And to do that, he's going to kidnap one of his clients, played by Tony Shalhoub.
That's right. And he has 2 partners.
Anthony Mackie and Dwayne Johnson. Okay, so I was watching this movie this time. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna real like dig in, and I like this movie. I think that when you approach it, how much is Michael Bay like aware of what he's making?
I mean, to me, this is so I like this movie a lot, actually. And to me, this is the perfect harnessing of his talents.
Yeah.
And also the tensions and ambiguities in him where so he loves America.
Yeah.
He loves Americana. I'm thinking of those shots in the Transformers movie where Mark Wahlberg just has a big American flag.
Yeah.
He loves America in the way that a can of Miller Lite loves America.
Yeah, that can Mark Wahlberg's cracking and down in the middle of the streets as robots are fighting.
And I think there are more productive tensions in here than in Pearl Harbor, where it's like, this movie is all about the tackiness. It's like, I love America, but also you have to admit, it's like a country full of dumb fucking rubes who love dumb fucking things.
The thing about this movie is that like the success that Mark Wahlberg, and he gets that success, is hollow and empty, but you know that Michael Bay lives in that house. And that's a house that he would live in.
Michael Bay is Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Right. And so as dumb as that character is.
But the film thinks Mark Wahlberg is dumb.
Yes.
It doesn't want you to like him either.
No.
Because he's an evil man.
But it empathizes with him,
It
I
does.
think. And it understands him.
But like I could see a version, like if Michael Bay like truly liked Mark Wahlberg, there would be a version of this movie where Mark Wahlberg is kind of stumbling into these situations and like making it so, you feel sympathetic. Mark Wahlberg is awful. Everyone is awful. Dwayne Johnson is maybe the only innocent that gets corrupted by them as the movie plays along. But it also, there's a lot of tensions going on.
Like does Michael Bay like the Dwayne Johnson character? Because the way Dwayne Johnson plays him, he's this like, Jesus freak basically who like, he's being tempted all on the way. And at the, he's the one who's always tempted to like rat people out or to leave the mission. He's the one who's most,
but he wants to do good.
Yeah. He wants to do good. And like, I can see Michael Bay, the old debate about like, do the Coen brothers hate their characters?
Yeah.
I think that applies here as well. And I'm not criticizing the movie because I think the movie is like, there's a purity to the character. I think there's a lot of ambiguity about whether you're supposed to like him or not. I'm not sure Michael Bay does. Michael Bay hates the weak.
Oh, he hates the weak.
Yeah.
But the thing is that Mark Wahlberg is the strong though.
Yes. But he's also...
the way that I feel is like Michael Bay's like, well, I'm the smart guy.
Yeah.
Like if I was like, I'm successful, I did it right. I want to show people who don't like made the wrong decisions. And isn't this funny?
Or it's like a Dorian Gray version of what he could have been.
Yes.
But
at the same time, this movie is that maximalist Michael Bay style. But there's like interesting kind of structural conceits in this movie. The way that the narration jumps from character to character, I don't know if it was a conscious decision, but it's like everyone is the star of their own story.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
that like everyone thinks that the other person is dumb.
Yeah.
And that they know what's going on. And I really like that. They're the only redeemable normal character is Ed Harris in this movie. And he has the good life. He has a giant house by the water.
Well, Michael Bay respects competence.
Yes.
He likes the best of the best. And he doesn't respect that these other guys don't have competence.
But like even like Tony Shalhoub, he doesn't like him. He's a joke. But like there's a part where Mark Wahlberg, he's talking to there's a woman they meet and he's like, "Oh, we're directing a music video." And that's how he gets her to like on his side. And I'm like, but that's what Michael Bay would have done.
There's a scene where Tony Shalhoub is like berating two of his employees.
Yes, I wrote that down in my notes too.
Yeah.
Where he's like, look at you, you're fat, you're pimply, you're ugly.
And Michael Bay's camera is
it's
just
like, look at these grotesques.
he agrees.
Yes.
Like you're supposed to hate Tony Shalhoub, but he agrees.
But it's like, like these are the minimum wage workers and look at this slime.
Yeah. But then also at the same time, like this is a movie, much like something like Spring Breakers, where there's an attraction repulsion to every image on screen. A lot of the movies set in like Florida and it's full of tacky Florida locations and imagery.
There's not one normal person that appears except for Ed Harris and his wife in this movie.
There are people like somebody, a couple come in and be like, "Hey, I got my wife these great breast implants. Like, take a look at her tits. Aren't they great?" Michael Bay loves that and he hates it and he loves it.
That is the like what makes this movie good is that like you can feel Michael Bay's like I like this, but it's gross when you see it. And in the context of the kind of movie that he makes, it just goes on so long. But that's the point. It's like Wolf of Wall Street.
Well, yeah.
Like these good times, they just keep going, and then eventually it goes bad because there's nowhere else for these people to go.
Well, when the Coen brothers make a movie like this, like Fargo, there's not... I was going to say there's not a wasted moment. Like Fargo obviously has digressions in it. Like that scene where she meets the old classmate. But like it's tighter.
But there's also like sympathetic characters in Fargo.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's none of that in this movie.
It's just like this movie, it doesn't have that like satisfying snap of like a movie where every element is in place. It's not one of those heist gone wrong type movies where...
But if it did, it would not be a Michael Bay film.
Well, exactly. Like what it does have in lieu of that satisfying everything is in its place clockwork quality is just so much stuff.
And every shot is like they're standing in front of a building at night and there's a giant woman painted on the side. There's a scene where Ed Harris meets Tony Shalhoub for like 30 seconds in a big arena, and every chair in that arena has graffiti on it. And I feel they went in and like did that.
And it's surprising to me a little bit that this movie kept me with it, like from beginning to end, over 2 hours long. Like I kept finding it funny. I kept finding it interesting to look at. It didn't become numbing for me.
Really?
Yeah. And
I find it numbing every time I watch it.
Well, I don't know. I was with it. And I think a lot of that is funny things keep happening.
Yes.
And also the three main actors, well, probably like the 5 or 6 main actors.
They're all very good.
They're all really good. They're all like totally in it. They're not winking.
No.
Well, Dwayne Johnson is a little bit.
But
he's
Mark
good.
Wahlberg is incapable of winking as an actor.
And it just has that like strong anchor of those actors, I think that really, yeah.
And this film, also not a success. And I think Michael Bay's like, I don't know what people want. I guess I'll make more Transformers. But he made 2 more after that. And then he made The Ambulance, which was his answer of like, all right, I'm going to make a small film. Like this is like an action film. And that was also not a success.
Well, I think at that point, he's just kind of a victim of, you know.
Six Underground, a movie nobody liked. That was a Netflix film.
But
I like it.
Ambulance, I think, was a victim of the current marketplace. It came out in 2022, right after the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
Me
and Peter saw that at Times Square in New York City.
Mid-budget movie.
Yeah, but great actors in it as well.
I think it works. Yep. I mean, I'm ambivalent. People love what he's doing with the camera in that. I'm a little ambivalent about it.
Too much?
A little bit,
like, slow down a little bit. Slow down.
Yeah.
And Michael Bay maybe just doesn't have really a place anymore. Like that's, I think
I'm looking forward to his old master stage. What does late style Bay look like?
Is he looking at like Clint Eastwood and he's like, is this what I make? Like, what do people want? Because like Ambulance is a movie of an old man trying to be young. He's like, I got drones, right? That's what you want. That's what kids use.
Yeah.
And like that didn't work. And he's a guy who's always reacting to what played before. So the last thing he directed was a true crime TV series, which, no thank you. Well, I wish Mark Hansen would hear. He could probably speak to it because he's probably seen it. But that is a defeated man's next work. And he has something else on his film. I'll believe it when I see it because there's always new stuff coming. But like, I'm just fascinated about where Michael Bay. Throughout his entire career, I've been fascinated. Where is Michael Bay going to go next? Because he doesn't. The calmest he's ever been is Pain and Gain, and that is not a calm film.
It's difficult for me to imagine. I mean, we're in it now, but just like a landscape where he's not one of the Titans.
I mean, he's not one of the Titans right now.
So yeah, I'm kind of interested to see what that looks like.
And he tried the streaming thing with Underground 6, and people were like, no, thank you, because that was like him unleashed.
And that cost $1 trillion. Yeah.
And the thing is that like his movies are very hateful. Like we kind of touched on that a little bit, but like that's like for all the like, oh, they're practical, blah, blah, blah. Like it hates everyone in these films. And I think maybe people don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
So where does he have this? It's like the Daily Wire presents a Michael Bay picture.
I can't wait for that.
All right. So as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, before we get to letters, I just want to note again, we do have a small event that we're holding in Toronto again on December 16th, Monday, 7 p.m. at Eyesore Cinema. We're going to be showing a Christmas movie of some kind and just having it.
We'll probably do a recording too of something.
Yeah, the event is called A Very Important Cinema Club Christmas. We're doing it in the back room of Eyesore Cinema. Come on by. But here's the thing. We do have a link to tickets.
Yes. There's not a lot of seats at the back room of Eyesore Cinema.
Yeah. So just like, it's going to be a very small event. So get your ticket now.
Get it. It's $500.
Yeah.
It's like golden plate kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, it's $5.
It's $5.
Yeah. Those rooms aren't free is what I'll say. All right. Our first letter is from Jack, and he goes, "Hey, Justin and Will, I really enjoyed your recent episode on Harry Langdon. Thank
you.
That was one that we went in, and you can hear us in the episode going like, well, this is what he is? Have you revisited any of those films since we recorded, Will?
No, I mean, I didn't like them.
I love learning about forgotten stars from Hollywood's past. On that note, I wanted to see if either of you are familiar with the silent, early, talky comedian filmmaker Charlie Bowers.
I have a Blu-ray of Charlie Bowers' work that I think, was it Flickr Alley put it out?
Probably.
But I haven't really gone into it.
He did a lot of things with stop motion animation, especially for the time. He's on the verge of rediscovery, so if you want to have a I liked him before it was cool cred, now's the time to ask. Ooh, I'm going to add that to the list.
Yeah,
that sounds good. Oh, I love Flickr Alley. They're the best. Our next letter is from Eleanor. And they asked, "Hello, Justin Will. First of all, thank you for giving me months of listening material. I work as a custodian, so I need all the audio accompaniment I can get." I love that. Any podcast that I listen to a new episode, I'm like, oh, I love this. And I see a huge back catalog. I'm like, let's go. Secondly, I was wondering if you know any interesting or really any transgender filmmakers, beside the Wachowskis, of course.
Well, I mean, obviously Vera Drew comes to mind, even though...
Gotham Award winning just recently.
Yeah,
Vera
that's
Drew.
right. The People's Joker. I'm a huge fan of... I'm not sure how they identify now, but the pornographer Kim Christie. Check out Kim Christie's mid-1980s, a very strange film, Squalor Motel, which is... It's kind of a cafe flash sort of weird art porno.
The letter mentions the Wachowskis, obviously. Love them very much. We never done an episode on them, have we?
No, we haven't.
That's very surprising.
We have to do that soon.
And like off the top of my head, I think mostly of filmmakers that are just doing it now, like Jane Schoenbrunn from I Saw the TV Glow. They're working a lot, or like being out there and doing interviews.
This is one that I would like more suggestions on, though. If people have recommendations, let us know.
I realize the letter continues, maybe a little bit out of your wheelhouse and maybe has potential for you to get yelled at. You could, for example, try to argue it's Ed Wood. But my soul is hungry for this. I'm not sure where to even begin looking, and you boys seem to eat your vegetables. Still, if you want to pass on this one and name some trans film critics, that would also be helpful. I mean, Liz Purcell, who did work on our Revenge of the Dead disc, they did a commentary on it, so right there.
And also I would say, you know, Willow McClay has a great book with Caden Gardner out right now called Corpses, Fools, and Monsters, The History and Future of Transness in Cinema, that's well worth picking up.
But when it comes to other trans filmmakers, let us know, because I would love to do a deep dive in that, even though we will preface it with, as we try to do whenever we touch topics that we will probably get a lot of stuff wrong in. Our next letter is from Andrew, And they go, Dear Justin and Will, can I suggest William Reynolds as a topic for an episode? He edited some great movies. I think we asked for an editor on one episode. He did The Godfather and The Day the Earth Stood Still. Have you ever seen The Day the Earth Stood Still? I don't think I've ever seen
The
it.
original? Yeah, I saw it when I was a kid.
Verada, Nicto.
Robert Wise.
He was also gay. The letter mentions that. Not off my head. His top 4 or 5 on Letterboxd are pretty foundational, well-known films. Maybe with the exception of Sound of Music, which I have an affection for but don't love. I had never really considered him until someone I follow on Letterboxd recently mentioned him in a review and brought him to my attention. All right. Top 5 movies, interesting, but let me see what his bottom 5 films, because that's where,
Oh, yeah. Well, there's one near the bottom called Carpool. That was his final film, the Tom Arnold hit, Carpool.
No.
But what I'm really interested about with William Reynolds is he edited both Heaven's Gate and Ishtar.
Whoa.
And it's and Ishtar, we know that's one of those movies where she shot 1,000,000 feet of film.
But so did he on Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, exactly. So I would be interested if there are interviews with William Reynolds about working on those.
Yeah, I think that the problem with those is that watching the movie, I feel will not give you his editorial stamp. What would be interesting is to hear him talk about it and then watch the movies, because you can see how he formed something out of these endless, streams of footage. Man, he worked for a long time. Looking at the bottom here, it's 52nd Street, Carnival in Costa Rica, Nijinsky. There you go. Yeah.
The ballerina.
So Ends Our Night. And then you get into the 80s and it's that's a Robert Wise film, Rooftops.
This is
starring Jason Gedrick.
This is what happens to every person, every craftsman in Hollywood. They start, in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, they're making they're doing 5 easy pieces or good movies. And then in the 90s, they're doing Carpool.
Oh, but he also edited Roman Polanski's Pirates.
Oh man, I want to hear all about that. Yeah.
All right. So thank you very much.
Oh, and Yellowbeard. You know Yellowbeard?
Yes.
Piece of shit.
So thank you very much for bringing that to it. He didn't edit Yellowbeard. Did you just naming pirate movies off the top of your head?
It's true. He edited Yellowbeard.
Yellowbeard?
I'm not kidding. Obviously, he had a reputation of
as a pirate guy.
You have to do all the terrible pirate movies from the 80s.
So, as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. Now, on our Patreon this week, we did something we've never done before. What did we do, Will?
We reviewed the special features on a bunch of public domain DVDs from 25 years ago.
But we did it live.
That's right. We played them. We played the trivia games.
Yes. So
you can hear
Will,
the bios.
You can hear Will get up as we're recording and put in a DVD to have the menu. You can hear the menus playing in the background.
Yeah, this is interactive. I think we've broken new ground as a podcast. We're playing.
There's a clip. I had to stop the recording because the dog started eating a bag. And is it a film-related bag? It is. What is it? You have to join the Patreon to find out.
And this is so important. We played trivia games on old DVDs for Charlie Chaplin and Abbott and Costello. And if you play those games along with us, you will get a film studies degree.
Yeah, guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
So you can check that out at patreon.com/theimportantcinemaclub. Next week, what are we doing, Will?
We are doing, how about you come up and see us sometime?
Oh, okay, so I went, all right, well, we need another topic. Let's do something popular.
Something popular. That's what began.
And then after much discussion, we ended on Mae West.
Well, because we were we should do a woman. We haven't done a woman in a while. And we're okay, who's popular? It's Greta Gerwig? No. Ava DuVernay? No. It's and then we start thinking about, what about an actress? And that's
we had a bunch of names, but we're we want to get to these.
But then a little birdie said Mae West.
That was me.
And then I was ooh, that everyone knows Mae West.
Now
Justin said
no one knows Mae West. So the question I have is, who listening to this podcast right now, what is your age? Have you seen a Mae West film? Yeah. Do you know who Mae West is?
I'm curious.
Me and Will threw percentages out. I'm not going to say it on the podcast, but I'm very curious about what her lasting cultural legacy is. Bob Hope, most people know who Bob Hope is, even if they haven't seen a Hope film.
This is where we disagreed. Yeah. I think most people... Well, maybe not most people. I think a lot of people know who Mae West is.
And this is a self-selecting audience who's listening to this podcast.
Yes. You guys probably know who she is.
Yes. But I'm curious. I think a lot of people may not know who she is.
Do you think people know who Groucho is?
Absolutely.
Because of the glasses and the mustache.
Do they know who Groucho Marx is?
They know who Charlie Chaplin is.
100. Buster Keaton, they can say that.
Mae West, though. Come up and see me sometime.
I don't think they know who she is.
All right. Well, we're going to change that because we're going to talk about She Done Him Wrong, I'm No Angel, and Sextet, her last film. We may watch My Little Chickadee too, just for
Will
fun.
show me a clip of Sextet. Man, we are so cruel to these actors because we always pick their last film.
It's fun.
So that's what we'll be doing next week. Mae West, please don't send us letters about it. I'm preempting it. Because whenever we do a classic subject that may not get taught, like, do you think maybe, Blank Check is doing Mae West?
I mean, if they had any balls, they would.
So that's what we're doing next week. Until then, my name's Dustin Clue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening.
Well, speaking of great filmmakers, we were both on a Zoom call this week.
Oh, thank you for bringing this up, Will, because I don't think I would have remembered.
Last week, listeners will remember that I interviewed Whit Stroob and Peter Alalunas, who are the editors of a new book about Roberta Findlay. Mm-hmm. Roberta Findlay, one of the most prolific female genre filmmakers, worked mostly in pornography in the 60s and 70s, then made a lot of direct-to-video horror movies in the 80s.
And also disappeared.
That's right.
Like, she made all of her films, and then she just went away. And you can find the episode we did a long time ago. It was called, I think, like, Roberta Findlay would hate us for doing this or thinks you're stupid for liking her film.
Because whenever she's interviewed, she says, I'm not a pioneer. My movies were bad. I hate the people who watch them. And stop saying that I'm like a groundbreaking woman director because I hate women. Mm-hmm. She'll say that.
She'll say it over and over again. Thanks to companies like Vinegar Syndrome, her films started to come out again. She's been doing commentaries. And her films have never been more available. So like A Woman's Torment, we talk about it. It's on Blu-ray. You can go pick it up.
Yeah, and many of her movies, I think, are really good.
That's the thing. Her movies are good.
Yeah, not all of them.
No.
But a lot of them.
I mean, she made a lot of pornography.
Yeah, and there are a lot of contradictions in her, like with anybody.
She likes to talk about that, like, she never had any intent. You cannot do a feminist reading on her films because, like you said, not a fan of women. And that those were never consciously going through her mind. But I mean, she is a land of contrast because she also loves classic cinema, was her own cinematographer, worked on other people's films as a cinematographer, and was obsessed with capturing interesting images.
And so when people do interviews with her, once they can get past her defenses, she'll start talking about, well, I did light some of those movies pretty well, and I was very interested in the cinematic frame and beauty. And the thing is, you watch her movies, including the pornos, they are made by a woman.
Yes.
Like, that stuff inevitably comes in.
It's undeniable when you watch them.
And people have written about that. People have talked about that. We went to this book launch, this virtual book launch.
Yeah. So the authors of the book, Whit Stroob and Peter
Alalunas.
Sorry, I got it incorrect. They somehow convinced Roberta Findlay to sit down and do a Zoom call.
So Whit is with her at her office in Sear Sound.
I believe her apartment.
No,
it was her office?
It was her office.
Okay.
She runs a sound recording studio, has for many years.
Yep, decades.
That Sonic Youth, Paul McCartney, like every famous musician has recorded there.
Yeah, so a little background on Roberta Findlay. She started studying classical music. That's where she met her husband at the time, Michael Findlay. They had a not good relationship. He seemed very abusive.
But they made many movies
together that she starred in. She was a cinematographer. She co-wrote some of them, and then she went off on her own way, and she ended up with her partner doing this music studio. And she's done it for decades. If you call her up and ask her about the movie, she'll say, I don't want to talk about it, and hang up the phone.
So don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah. But here she is on the Zoom call, seemingly unaware of what this was supposed to be.
She's been told that there's a book about her.
Yes, she has not read it.
She's been interviewed for it, and she's like, why would anybody write a book? That's ridiculous.
Yes.
And this Zoom call was great because it was one academic after another.
Oh, I love this. So Whit, I think he's a fan of this podcast because I think he's emailed us.
He's listened. Yeah.
I hope you're listening now, Whit. Thank you for doing this monumental work. Now, I will say, I really love the book. Like, I read
it's great.
From cover to cover. It is academic.
But it's smart,
It's very smart in the way that it approaches it. But what this Zoom call was each writer of these essays presenting their thesis to Roberta Findlay.
Like lambs to the slaughter.
And she was, I believe Will said this as we were watching it, like Don Rickles
Yeah.
just tearing into them.
roasting one after another, and people would come up and they would say, well, my essay
Was
is
inspired
about
by a novel I recently read.
it's about female subjectivity in the pornographic films of Roberta Findlay, and it's proposing that, you know, like other minor cinemas. And I heard, and
Sorry, you would hear her laughing on the Zoom call, be like,
and by the way, no disrespect to the authors, because like I understand those words. Like and those essays are all very cogent and make good points. But like when I started hearing film studies jargon, I knew like she's gonna laugh.
Yep.
And she did.
And then like they would end and they're like, this is my thesis, this is what I'm trying. There'd be like a beat and it would cut to her and she'd be like, none of that is true.
That makes no sense to me. And you know, it was interesting though when Kayla Janess did this essay about a film that she made called Shauna, Everyman's Fantasy.
Yeah, which is like a black mark on
it's
Roberta
one of the
Findlay's.
most evil films ever made.
Yeah.
You know.
And Roberta said like, yeah, it was exploitative. I wanted to make money. That's why I did it.
And kind of, yeah, she got some kind of interesting things out of Roberta Findlay talking about it.
Yep.
And then, you know, there was a further, you know, the Q&A went on and Roberta Findlay, like, so, you know, she brought up Doris Wishman.
Oh, yeah. Well, someone brought up Doris Wishman and Roberta Findlay went, and she like hit the wall.
Yeah.
And then Will asked, did you have any interactions with Doris Wishman?
And she did this whole story about like, oh, Doris Wishman, I met her once and she was so funny. She had an outer borough accent that made me sound.
Hello.
Yeah.
And like Roberta Findlay, if you've ever heard her talk, like, you know, she has an accent doing just like one word she kept doing of Doris Wishman saying hello was so funny and surreal.
And one more thing I want to say about this event was,
I'm so glad I was. You're talking about some
early
Zoom
on,
crashing.
it was getting Zoom bombed or
Yeah.
whatever. This is happening at Zoom meetings now, I hear, where somebody got hacked and somebody kept screen sharing pornography, by which I mean like Pornhub.com,
Yep.
like
Advertisements. Yeah.
Woman gets railed by five guys, pornography, and it just kept showing up over and over and over again. And if ever there were a book launch for this to happen at, I'm glad it was this one.
I think what was really interesting about this interview is you could almost feel Roberta starting to like crack as it went along. That there was like a parade of people that were like, oh, your work matters. And there were things that were like triggering thoughts that you could tell she hadn't thought about in a long time.
Well, when somebody asked, I think Michael Bowen asked, you know, could you say something about Michael, her ex-husband? She went on like a 15-minute monologue that was so powerful, I thought, talking about him. So like emotionally complicated, so ambivalent, talking about their whole relationship together that I honestly feel privileged to have seen it. Like, and yeah, you did feel her thaw as it went on because she's got her defenses up. Like she's been told for years that these movies are shit.
Yeah, she talked about like that she was only trying to craft beautiful images. And I asked her, like, are there any images you feel were successful? And she kind of like leaned back and like thought about it. And you could tell that like she hadn't thought about, like, no one has ever asked me, like, did I craft a beautiful image? Because I'm making pornography. Who cares?
Yeah.
And when she records a commentary track, which she does with a movie, it's just one person that's interested. Like, she doesn't know anyone's listening to this. Like, she thinks it's, you know, pay me, I'm here. All right, let's do it. Let's go. But to see like even just like 30 people who would just continually come up and say like, you know, your work means something to me. Like, you know, here are ad mats or posters and stuff like that. You could feel her kind of, you know, warming a little bit.
It's not bad. Yeah.
And she's also like, she's very defensive, but like you can never tell when she's joking and when she's not joking.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, very fun.
Yeah.
Now, if I was in front of her and asked her any, I would be roasted like I would just burst into flames probably having to interview her about something. But thank you very much for the two authors for putting this on.
Oh, yeah.
It was a delight. Something I never thought I could think about in a million
When I
years.
opened the Zoom window and there she is,
Just sitting
I
there.
was in heaven. It's like, she's real.
And then he's
Roberta
like,
Findlay.
And then they ended it, and she's like, "What are we still on? What are we doing? What's going on?" I loved it. And check out their book. It's in paperback. It's
So
very
good.
cheap now. You can get it off Amazon. Roberta Findlay, yours to discover.